Some people believe that their grandparents' house is a warm, inviting, and safe place to be, but the sender of tonight's story might have a different opinion. So let me read you tonight's story, and you can see why she might feel that way. So grab your favorite tea and settle in, and let me tell you another scary Appalachia story, because of course, this is Tea After Midnight. This story comes from Taylor. Hello, my name is Taylor, and my friend Alice and I have decided to share our story of one fall in the mountains. We haven't talked about it much since, but we both remember it differently. I was going to my grandparents and they let me bring a friend because I wanted to show her their cabin. The woods were familiar to me. I had been out there a couple of times, but I hadn't heard anything until this. I know the rules of the mountains by heart, but I really didn't acknowledge them much as I was just a kid and I didn't believe in that stuff, since nothing had really ever happened to me in the time that I spent there. I had always heard stories, but I figured it was just some made-up thing meant to scare kids. I now think very, very differently. We drove over there and the ride was fine. Once my parents left, we put our stuff in the cabin as she introduced herself to my grandma and grandpa. Later that night, we watched a movie and played a couple games with everyone. My grandma made dinner and we helped set the table. At the table, we were eating and talking, having a great time, when suddenly we heard 3 knocks, but none of us could tell which way those knocks were coming from. Later, I found out that my friend heard a completely different sound. She swears she heard 3 creaks coming from the stairs. Everyone froze. My grandma gave me a look as if she knew exactly what it was, but I knew she was signaling to ignore it and just continue with the night like nothing happened. So we did, and that was the worst choice I have ever made. I know she was right in that matter, just to ignore it, so we did, or at least tried. I completely brushed it off. I figured it was just the wind since it was abnormally windy outside that particular night. I couldn't fathom that they actually believed those things that I thought were made-up stories. My grandma and grandpa went to bed soon after cleaning up for dinner. My friend and I made our way to the basement. In the basement, they had a spare room. Since we were partially underground, we had windows, but they were sort of higher up on the wall, right at the base of the ground. You could see right out to the woods out back of the house. Our bed was across the room from that window, leaving a clear view out and in. When we got down there, we plopped on the bed and started a movie. 10 Things I Hate About You, our absolute favorite, by the way. I could hear the wind outside, but what confused me was how non-windy it actually sounded, if that makes sense. Like it was wind, but it wasn't. Like when you hear someone calling out to you and you are convinced it was a certain someone, but it ends up being a completely different person. The wind grew louder, almost closer. I kept looking out as I was starting to get paranoid. We realized that we didn't even bring snacks down, so my friend agreed to go get them upstairs from the pantry. She made her way up while I watched the movie. We were about halfway through. A couple of minutes had passed and I suddenly heard the front door upstairs open. After that, a couple more minutes passed and I saw something swiftly pass by the window. I figured it was just some animal, but I looked down for a split second, then looked back up, and I saw 2 feet, ankles down, bare feet. They were somewhat dirty, like when you've been playing in the creek all day. They were facing the wall. I sat and stared at it, afraid to look away. My heart was racing as though it would jump out of my chest. I heard the front door open and close again. I jumped, instinctively looking up. I quickly looked back at the window where I saw just a little bit of its ankle stepping out of view. It never came back after that. Although the door closed before it stepped out of frame, I still convinced myself it was just my friend playing a prank. I heard footsteps coming to the room, as well as a chip bag rustling, so I knew it was my friend. She came in looking slightly flustered and pale. I looked at her confused. She set the chips down, only saying a couple of words. Once she felt a little better, I asked her what had happened. She said that while she was grabbing snacks, she heard a noise outside. Not thinking, she decided to go out front to check what it was. That's when she saw a tall, slim, lanky figure scurry from behind a tree to behind the house, out of view. She said she rushed back inside afterward, after freezing in panic for a hot minute. That explained the door opening and closing, but now that I think back, she only went out front. The window where I saw the feet was at the back of the house. I never ended up telling her what happened while she was upstairs. I was still sort of skeptical. I also noticed she had shoes on, though the figure outside did not. Later that night, as she was sleeping, I looked to see if her feet were dirty. They were not. Later on, we were trying to sleep when suddenly a screaming noise woke us up. We jumped up, running over to the window and pulling over a desk chair to see out. As we slowly stood in the view of the window so we could see, we see what she described earlier, that tall, slim, lanky figure. It suddenly stopped dead in its tracks, looking directly at us. It appeared as though it was coming closer to the house before we got there, but it stopped like a deer in headlights. It soon slipped behind a nearby tree, where it disappeared. We heard another scream after that. This time we realized how distorted it sounded as it got farther and farther away. It was also very, very long, like something humanly impossible. That was the last thing we remember that night. We both laid there that night trying to sleep, but we just couldn't. The next day, we didn't talk about what happened at all. We were traumatized. After that, I only went back there during the day and left before night. We never told anyone. We just wanted to forget, but obviously, that isn't going to happen. Now I know you should always, and I mean always, listen to the rules of the mountains, no matter what. Taylor, I just want to say thank you so much for sending in your story. I hate that you both went through that and saw that because that's absolutely terrifying. And like I said in the beginning, going to your grandparents' house, you would think that it'd be a warm, safe, inviting place to be. But after that, I don't think I could ever go back to my grandparents' house. So while y'all are sitting down for dinner, you hear the 3 knocks outside, but your friend hears something completely different. She hears 3 creaks inside. And I honestly don't know what's scarier, something outside knocking on the door wanting to come in, or something being on the inside of the house. But I will say that your grandmother signaling to you guys to ignore it, that was honestly the best thing you possibly could have done. But I hate that something still showed up after that. Imagine how creepy it would be to be sitting on the bed, waiting for your friend to come back with the snacks, and you happen to look outside and see 2 feet, bare feet, standing there. They're dirty. You don't know whose feet they are, what it belongs to, but to see that, and then hear the door open. And then your friend comes back down, and she kind of seems like something's weird, something's off. So you ask her about it, and she says that she sees a tall, slim, lanky figure go behind the house when she went out there. First off, I want to say that that is terrifying, and your friend is so brave for even going out there. It terrifies me she went out there by herself, because Appalachian Mountains in the middle of the night, no thank you. But her to see that, and then later, after you guys had went to bed or tried, you wake up to screaming noises, so you look out there, and you both see it at the same time. But it's coming closer to the house, and it sees you. I would have been absolutely petrified, so I am so sorry that you guys saw that, but it terrifies me to know that something like that was lurking around the house, and that it's still out there. So Taylor, again, thank you for sending in your story. I'm so sorry that you guys went through that. And if anybody in the comments knows what that could have possibly been based off the description, please let us know. But that does conclude this episode of Tea After Midnight. If you have any personal scary stories you want to share, you know I would love to read them. You can email me at the email on screen or the email in the caption of this video. But as always, you guys, thank you so much for being here. I hope you know how much I love you. I hope you have the best night, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
This story was sent to me by one of you guys, which you guys have been doing for a very long time, and I haven't been reading them. I'm so sorry. I've been a little busy, but listen, I finally checked my email, and I found this one. It's really creepy, okay? I'm gonna tell the story from my POV, even though it's not my story. It's this person's story. So I never believed in the little people, and that was probably my biggest mistake. Growing up in the Appalachian Mountains, I'd heard the story dozens of times. Every family had their own version of it. Tiny people living deep in the woods, guardians of some certain places, ancient beings that existed long before roads, before homes, before anybody even settled in the mountainside. The older people never referred to them as fairies. They always referred to them as the little people. They'd actually get quite angry if you used the word fairies. And there were lots of rules. You couldn't leave gifts for them. You couldn't take gifts from them. Don't follow the voices that you hear in the woods. And if you ever see anything close to the tree line, you leave. Immediately, I thought it was all nonsense because like, what the fuck do you mean little tiny people? That was until the summer I learned the reason why people continue to tell these stories. It started when I was 24 years old. My grandfather had recently passed away and my family had inherited a large plot of land that had been in our family for generations. It was beautiful, it was huge, it was several acres of land in eastern Tennessee. Just vast, untouched mountain forest. It was wonderful. It was just dense forest full of creeks and a bunch of places to explore. I spent almost every weekend there, learning to navigate those woods, finding hidden trails and making them actually functional, following animal trails, following streams, you know, the gist. One afternoon when I was walking, I found something strange that I had never seen before. It was like this circular formation made out of stones. And at first it looked like some natural formation, but as I looked closer, it was very symmetrical. Every single stone had been so neatly placed, so intricately, that it was most absolutely done on purpose. In the center of that was a flat stone, almost like a dinner plate size, and on it was a mixture of animal bones, bird feathers, smoothed out river stones, and like tiny little wood carvings made out of like forest wood. And at first I laughed because I was like, oh my god, some kids made this is so cool. Without thinking, I picked up one of the carvings off of the rock. It was no bigger than my thumb, and it was like this tiny little human carved figure. Craftsmanship was incredible. Whoever made it like really focused intricately on the details of it. So as a forest trinket collector, I slid it into my pocket and went about my merry way. Didn't know it at the time, but according to every rule in the book, I had broken the very first and most important one. That night I didn't get a wink of sleep, and it was because I felt off. Not because anything happened, I just felt deeply off. Matter of fact, that entire evening I had the whole sensation that somebody was watching me. Every time I would glance at the windows, I expected to see something staring back at me, but never saw anything. Eventually I was just like, you know what, you're being insane, so I just went back to sleep. Next morning I woke up forgetting all about it until I stepped outside. The little wood carving that I had taken from the circle was sitting on my front porch. It was directly in front of my door. I would have stepped on it had I not been somebody who looks at my feet when I walk. I thought, you know, maybe it fell out of my pocket as I was coming in the house last night. So I take that little carving and I throw it into the woods because that freaked me right out. After that, I try to forget about it and I go inside and grab a drink. But when I go back outside, the figure is standing in the exact same spot that I left it, staring directly at my house. And it gave me the most unsettling, disgusting feeling in my gut. I searched the entire property. Nobody was around that I could see. The rest of the day went normally until I went to sleep. It was around 2 o'clock in the morning when I heard a soft tap, 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 tap on my window. When I sat upright, the knocking stopped. I'm just sitting there in the darkness listening, looking at my window, trying to focus on what it is. And all of a sudden I hear the tap, 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 tap again. So immediately I grab my flashlight that I always keep next to my bed to get up and use the bathroom because I am terrified of the dark. I shine it outside. At first I couldn't see anything. There was no animals, no nothing, no footprints even of anything. But then when my flashlight swept the tree line, that's when I saw something move. And it was way too small to be any kind of animal. Not even just too small, it was just oddly shaped to be an animal. It looked like a tiny person. But at that point, there was nothing I could do. It was dark, it was nighttime, the thing had gone away, so I went back to sleep. Days continued to pass, and things continued to go missing. You know, like tools, shiny things, jewelry. And on top of that, every single morning I would find this weird circular arrangement of stones outside of the cabin. For all of those shenanigans, I literally was done. I was fed up, and I was going to catch whoever was messing with me. That night, I planned to stay up the entire night on the porch with a flashlight, waiting to see who the hell was outside of my cabin. It was 2 o'clock in the morning when I first felt like something was off because the woods went completely silent. And everybody who lives in the Appalachian Mountains or even near the Appalachian Mountains knows that when the woods go silent, there is danger. And as I'm sitting there listening, trying to hear any small sound, I started to hear children's laughter. Mind you, there is nobody else around here because, like I said, it is rural Tennessee, mountainous landscape in rural Tennessee. The laughter started moving and it started circling around my cabin. And I'm just sitting there in complete shock and fear. I have no idea what to do. And these children would run really close to the cabin and then run really far away from the cabin and run really close to the cabin, circle around the cabin, then go the other way circling around the cabin and then keep doing that over and over and over again. And all of a sudden the sound stopped and I shine my flashlight towards the edge of the woods and there's about 6 little small figures just standing there in a straight line watching me. These things are tiny, maybe about 3 feet tall, just standing there perfectly still, staring into my freaking soul. I honestly only got to see them for a very split second because once the light hit them, they vanished completely behind the trees. And I don't mean that by they ran behind the trees, they just poof behind the trees. 1 second they're there and 1 second they're not. I'm still standing on the porch holding my flashlight, trembling in petrified fear, bro, when all of a sudden I hear a whisper behind my ear, whisper, "You took it." And I knew immediately in my heart of hearts that they were talking about that little wooden figure. And then I started to hear multiple voices at once. "You took it, you took it, you took it." So standing there freaking out, I start apologizing fiercely and as fast as I can. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And I toss the wood carving out into the yard and everything stops. All the figures vanish, all the voices vanish, the figurine vanishes, and then there's just a nothing, just a stillness in the air. About 5 minutes later of me just standing there in complete fear, the sounds of the forest start to come back. Animals wake up again. And I swear up and down, and my family swears up and down, that the thing that I encountered that day was a fae, aka a little person of Appalachia. Anyways, you guys, make what you want of that story, but I think it's absolutely crazy and creepy. I 100% believe the OP. I have had experiences with things that I haven't even told to you guys because I fear that you will not believe me. I have seen things, my family has seen things that are just completely unexplainable to the normal person. Yeah, if you guys have your own stories and want to share them with me, my email is this right here. I will also have it down below in case you want to send me your story.
The most terrifying and unexplainable thing that I've ever experienced happened to me a few years ago. And you're going to think I'm insane after you hear what I'm about to tell you. And I've only told a handful of people this since it happened. But I was visited by what I can only describe as a poltergeist one night. The most paranormal and the darkest, scariest thing I've ever experienced in my life. And still to this day, I don't know what it was. And I pray that it never happens again. But if you want a scary story, here's what happened. I was about 25 years old at the time. I had just gotten a new girlfriend and we moved in together. And this was the first time I had been in a family situation. She had 2 young kids. They were 5 and 8 years old at the time. And we were very excited to be starting this new life together. We moved into a single wide trailer out in the middle of nowhere. I'm from Kentucky, so we're in the middle of nowhere. We're in the woods, very remote, and we were happy. Life was good. We were starting this new life together, me and her and the kids, and everything was great, we thought. This was a 3-bedroom trailer, so there were 2 smaller bedrooms at the back side of the trailer, which were the kids' rooms, and there was a bigger bedroom on the far end of the trailer, which was our bedroom. And within a couple months of living there, some very strange things started happening. So one afternoon, about 3 or 4 in the afternoon, it was summer break, the kids were out of school, and they had fallen asleep. Both of them had fallen asleep in their bedrooms. They were taking their afternoon summer nap like you do. And we saw this a good opportunity to go get us a nap in. So we went to the room, closed the door, and laid down and took a nap. About an hour into this nap, there was a knock on our bedroom door. I mean, a loud knock. This sounded like a grown man knocking on the door. And I rolled over and thought, well, obviously the kids have woken up. And Amber, my girlfriend at the time, she rolled over and said, "See what they want." So I just yelled, "What?" And there it was again. A very serious, aggressive knock. I thought, what the heck is that all about? I got up and opened the bedroom door. No one's there. It's silent. Now this is broad daylight. The sun is shining outside. It's dead silence. I thought, what in the world? So I walked back to the kids' rooms. There they are laying there, both of them asleep. And this ran chills all the way throughout my body. So I went back to the bedroom. Amber's sitting up in the bed at this point. I said, "You heard that knock, right?" She was like, "Yeah, of course I did." Have no idea what it was. So, it freaked both of us out, but we chilled out and was like, well, I don't know what that was all about. But in just a few days, it would get much, much worse. Now, when I was a kid, I loved scary movies. I loved ghost hunting out in the dark at night with my cousins, looking through the woods, looking for scary things, getting freaked out. I loved paranormal things when I was a little kid. Like my whole life growing up, we would go and try to see something scary in the woods. But for me, it was always Casper, the friendly ghost. It was the idea of seeing some transparent apparition floating through the woods real fast. And oh, that's scary, and we would run away laughing. I could have never prepared myself for the darkness that I would feel when this happened to me. The almost demonic feeling that I got from this experience. I could have never prepared myself for what was coming. So it's 3 o'clock in the morning. It's pitch black in the trailer. We're asleep in our bedroom. The kids are asleep in their room. And I am woken up by the most horrific screams you could ever imagine. And our daughter was 8 years old at the time. And it was Brianna's voice, screaming at the top of her lungs directly outside of my bedroom door. Get it off of me. Help, help, help. I mean, screaming bloody murder. Help, get it off. And I jumped up. I'm in my underwear. And, you know, it's only 15 foot from my bed to the bedroom door. And this screaming is directly outside of the door. And there is thrashing like she's fighting, like she's being kidnapped, like someone has come in the house. My first thought is someone is taking my daughter out of the house. I have cold chills all over my body right now. She's screaming at the top of her lungs. I jump up in my boxers, run and kick the door off the hinges. And as soon as that door opens, the sound is now out the back door. There was a back door on the kitchen. Our bedroom opened into the kitchen, dining room area, and there was a back door there. As soon as this door, my bedroom door opened, her screams are outside the back door, which is closed and locked. And she is screaming, help, 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 get it off, get it off. And I run as fast as I can and kick the back door wide open. And it is dead silent in the backyard. Complete silence. Just darkness. No moon, just pitch black 3 a.m. darkness out the back door. I run to the kids' bedroom. I turn around as fast as I could and run back to their bedroom. And there's Brianna, just peacefully sleeping in her bed. I go to Dalton's bedroom. There he is, just peacefully asleep. I ran back to my bedroom, and Amber, my girlfriend at the time, was sitting up crying on the edge of the bed. She experienced the whole thing too. So I sat down, and it broke me down. I sat down on the edge of the bed with my head in my hands and started freaking out. What was that? What could that have possibly been? I didn't know what to think. I thought I was losing my mind. But the fact that she also experienced it, she heard the whole thing. And it was absolutely horrifying. Needless to say, I didn't get any sleep. She didn't get any sleep the rest of the night. I was hyperventilating. I was full-blown panic. I thought someone was kidnapping our child out of our house. And there was nothing. There was absolute silence. And I told her immediately, we have to leave. We have to leave this house. Something it's very, very wrong. I had this overwhelming darkness come over me. Like the most negative thing I've ever felt in my life immediately when this happened. And following that, suddenly this house had this dark, heavy feeling all the way through it. And I knew we can't stay here. We have to leave this place. And we agreed in that moment that we have to find somewhere else to live. So we did. We moved. We found a nice little house for rent across the county, sitting right on the bank of the Kentucky River, and we got out of there. And the darkness never left that trailer. In between that experience and when we left, there was this darkness, this heavy weight hanging over that place up until we left. And we packed up all of our things and we moved. We had a grandfather clock at the time. An old, tall, antique, beautiful old grandfather clock that someone had given us, that we moved with us into this new house. We put this grandfather clock in the corner of the kitchen, and it didn't work, so the hands on the clock didn't move. Well, when we moved it in there, I set the hands to 3 o'clock, just because it was symmetrical and I liked the way it looked. Well, a couple weeks went by and I was standing at the stove in the new house now, and I glanced over at the clock, and the hands on this grandfather clock were bent outward, like someone had physically bent them forward. Now, the kids weren't big enough to reach up there to do this. Amber wouldn't have done that. Why would she have done that? And I didn't even tell anyone. I just bent them back and got a weird feeling about it. Well, some time passed, and we got pregnant. We had a daughter. And as time went on, our little girl started walking. And you know how babies are when they're just walking. They get around quick. I was sitting in the living room one afternoon, and Zaylee, my daughter, my baby at the time, had ran in the kitchen, and I heard the biggest crash. It sounded like the roof had fallen in on the kitchen, and I knew something bad happened. I jumped and ran in the kitchen, and my daughter, my little baby, was laying underneath of this grandfather clock. It had fallen over and crashed onto the ground. She was okay. She wasn't hurt. She was just kind of laying there, but it had fallen and shattered all around her and destroyed this clock. And I have a hard time not feeling like something had followed us. And it turns out, after talking to a couple people close to me, some family members who knew the folks who lived in the trailer before we did, I found out that someone had taken their life in the backyard of that trailer. A man whose son had passed away, and he ended his own life in the backyard of that trailer. And I've wondered ever since if maybe what I heard was just some remnants of some leftover darkness that was stained because of what happened there. Was that the sound of the moments before that were just stuck there? I don't know. I'll never know what it was, what those screams were. And I can't help but feel like something was stuck in that clock, you know. And I know that's far out for some people to imagine, but it was very real. Very, very real. Too real, in fact. And I'll spend the rest of my life hoping that I never have to experience anything like that ever again. And it still comes across my mind a lot, and hoping that whatever it was stayed there. So what was it? I know that I'm not just crazy because someone else experienced it with me. The kids never even knew it happened. And I would love to know if anyone else has ever experienced anything like this, or knows what it was. What did I experience? It changed a lot of things for me. It brought back this fear of the dark, like you have when you're a little kid. I don't sleep well a lot of times. And I think I will forever wonder, what was that? And needless to say, I don't watch scary movies anymore.
It was 1979, Annette was 15. She lived in a very rural place and there was never much to do. Her best friend Jackie lived next door and they spent most of their weekends and summers in the nearby woods, just wandering around, carving their initials into trees, generally trying to make fun. Annette's brother was 9 and her older sister was 21 and living away at nursing college. She was at the age where her brother was just annoying and she often found herself stuck babysitting him. One summer afternoon, after a long day of just passing time, Annette and Jackie were planning to sleep over at Jackie's house. But at the last minute, Annette's parents had decided to go out with friends for the evening, and so she was asked to babysit Derek. That evening, they were allowed to watch the TV, and they watched Doctor Who. Derek went off to bed, and Annette and Jackie, who were always trying to scare one another, decided to do a Ouija board. They've done one once before at Jackie's house, but nothing had really happened. They made the board up on some cardboard, set up in Annette's room, and grabbed a glass from downstairs. They turned out all of the lights and lit 3 candles and opened the board by sliding the glass to hello. Well, what should we ask? Asked Annette, feeling sillier by the minute. Is anyone here with us? It was around 10 p.m. now, so they just hung out in the bedroom, candles still lit, board still out, but just chatting about this, that, mainly about boys and planning their next trip to London. Suddenly, out of the darkness of the hallway, Annette heard shuffling. Still feeling spooked from earlier, she called out, Mom? It was just Derek, blearily rubbing his eyes as he came into the room and switched the light on. What are you doing? I can't sleep with all that noise. He moaned and lay down in Annette's bed with them. Sorry, Del, we'll be quiet. You just go back to bed, said Jackie kindly. She didn't have siblings and treated Derek like her own brother, but Derek's eyes had lit up at the sight of the Ouija board. Talking to ghosts? He said excitedly. No, how do you even know what that is? Scolded Annette, annoyed at her brother's intrusion. Our Billy has one and we did it at his sleepover. I swear the glass moved on its own. He started saying excitedly. Please, Nettie, please can I play? Fine, but nothing even happened before. This house is just as boring as ever. With that, they all sat down around the table again, lights out, candles lit, and opened the board. Again, Jackie called out. So, now is there anyone here? The glass shifted slightly under their light touch, looking suspiciously at one another as they lifted their fingers off the glass. Okay, so if you're here, what's your name? Called out Jackie, giggling slightly. She was convinced it was Derek pushing the glass, so she didn't expect anything to happen. Suddenly, the glass shot across the board, so fast the 3 of them couldn't keep their fingers on it. It landed on D. No way! I told you it would move, said Derek excitedly. I don't think I want to do this. Can we stop now? Annette said, feeling shivery with fear. The glass seemed to vibrate underneath them. They all locked eyes. Slowly, the glass moved around the board. D. I. Oh no, I don't like it, whimpered Jackie. She was absolutely not pushing the glass and she could see Annette and Derek barely touching it. A-N-E. Diane. Annette's blood ran cold. Her sister was Diane, but she wasn't here. She was 200 miles away at nursing school. That's not funny, Derek, Annette scolded, feeling more than a little creeped out. She noticed Derek looked pale and scared. Maybe it wasn't him after all. The 3 of them looked at one another and Jackie was the first to speak. Should we close it, guys? This is really creepy. What about Diane? Called out Annette more confidently than she felt. Before she'd even had the chance to put her finger on the glass, it shot across the board faster than before and quickly darted to letter after letter. Annette was trying to keep up and calling out each letter as it landed on it. D-O-T-H-R-E-A-T. D-O-F-E-A-R. She called out frantically as Derek and Jackie struggled to keep their fingers on it. Do threat, do fear. Suddenly, the candles on the table flickered and were snuffed out. The lights flickered and they heard an eerie whooshing sound. All of this activity startled both Derek and Jackie, who pulled their hands away from the glass. They all watched in horror as the glass began to spin ferociously in a circle. Then it seemed to hover for a second and shot off the side of the board, smashing into the chest into pieces. Jackie was crying and Derek was white as a sheet. Annette couldn't quite believe what had happened. Slowly, the realisation of what had happened hit her and she began to shake. They all started talking at once, discussing what had happened, freaking out and just trying to rationalise it. Oh no, we didn't close the board, shouted Jackie, looking at the shattered glass. They decided the best thing to do was burn the whole board. Annette lit it and they watched as the cardboard curled and burnt to ash. Just as they were discussing what to do next, the front door flew open and Annette's parents ran inside, frantically shouting amongst themselves. They stopped dead when they saw the 3 children in the living room. What are you doing messing with the fire? Why aren't you in bed? You need to pack a bag. You're going to stay at Grandma's. We have to go to your sister as soon as we can. Oh, no. Wait, what? Where are you going? Why are you going to Diane? Shouted Derek, who was shivering. We don't know the full story, but there's been an incident. Didn't you hear the phone? They've been trying to call here, apparently. They got hold of Auntie Maureen down the road who found us at the pub. Diane's been hurt working her placement at the hospital, and we need to get there as soon as we can.
God.
The next few hours passed in a blur. Jackie went home. Annette and Derek went to their grandma's. It turned out Diane had been working on the hospital on a night shift. She'd been transferring a patient to the morgue when she slipped and fell down a flight of concrete stairs. She'd broken a leg. Everyone just assumed it was a horrible accident, but Annette and Derek felt uneasy. They never spoke about the Ouija board again. A few weeks later, Diane had come home and was on bed rest. She was sleeping on the sofa to avoid the stairs. One evening, Annette was lying with her watching TV, and talk turned to the accident. So, you just fell. Must have been spooky in the morgue. Yeah, I guess, said Diane uneasily, but, oh, well, it's so stupid. I've done that trip so many times. The ward I worked on was geriatric, and honestly, we were always carting someone down there. Not to be insensitive, but you kind of get used to it. But that night, I don't know if something was just off. We'd taken old Mr. Jones down, handed him over, and I was on the way back to the ward when I reached the top of the stairs. And I swear the lights all just started to flicker, and I heard something. Then I guess I just lost my footing and fell. What did you hear? Oh, it's probably in my head. Don't worry about it, said Diane. No, go on. Tell me. Well, I heard a whisper right in my ear. It was so quiet, but it said something like, "Do threat, do fear." The end.
Oh.
What do you mean someone put a curse on her at her wedding? Lipstick on so I can run this mouth. Now focus. Scary story time, Fright Night Files. Naomi sent me this email July 31st of 2025. I was going to tell the story. I was communicating with her, and then I don't remember what happened, but I completely forgot about it. She messaged me and was like, "Hey, are you ever going to tell this story?" It's a good one. I am so sorry, Naomi. I am telling it now. I'm going to read it, just how she sent the email, because it's so good. My mother-in-law has always had a fear of frogs. Let's call her Rosa. I've never known why, just thought something silly happened, like one jumped in her hair once, and I honestly haven't thought about her phobia much at all, like not a big deal. We went camping this weekend, and my son caught a baby toad. He was so excited to show it to her. I'd forgotten about her phobia. She froze at first, then started screaming and running away. I've never seen Rosa act this way. The look of terror on her face was horrific. After she calmed down, she came back to the campsite and said, "I'm ready to tell you. As a new member of the family," that's what she says, "what happened to me. I'd already had a weird feeling because my mother-in-law is very practical, not dramatic, and I knew what she was about to tell me was very serious by her tone." Rosa explained that when she was married as a young woman, the town in Mexico where they're from shut down for the weekend. It was a huge party. She comes from money and was a debutante, so it was extravagant. She looked like a princess, had the nicest ceremony, catering, flowers, etc., even a horse and carriage. Her family was basically local royalty after all. Huge, huge party. About 2 weeks into the marriage, she fell ill. Sudden exhaustion, weakness, high fevers, loss of appetite, etc. After going to the doctor, they decided it was a virus and it would pass. It didn't. Rosa started getting worse, and it went on for about a month. After seeing the best specialists in the state to figure out what was going on, they all deemed it was an autoimmune disease or lupus, and that she only had about 5 years to live. Also, she could never have kids. Devastated with the news and trying the treatments they suggested, she kept declining. Also, Rosa started swelling in her abdomen and in her throat. Both looked like tumors. The doctor said it was normal from the medication and weren't concerned. Finally, her uncle suggested they visit a local medicine woman to see what was going on. Maybe some spiritual help would benefit her. Being Mexican, this is a common practice. So they all go to this local bruja in the village, and after examining her, she asked if she had eaten anything cooked by someone else other than her mother. Rosa responds with, "Well, yes, the village knows I'm sick and has been bringing meals. I also had many different caterers at the wedding. Although now only able to eat a little, she would take bites of everything to try and keep her strength. The bruja said someone other than her mother has been poisoning her via a curse put on her food since the wedding or even at the wedding." Rosa accepts a cleansing tea and ritual performed by the Bruja, hoping some magic will help her. At this point, Rosa's almost bedridden, my father-in-law and her mother taking care of her around the clock. The tea and ritual didn't seem to help whatsoever, and she kept getting weaker. One night soon after, Rosa had a dream and into a sleep paralysis state. She feels a jumping sensation all over her body, in her hair, on her shoulders, and finally in her throat and abdomen. She's unable to breathe for a few seconds and is choking on a lump in her throat. She's finally able to gain consciousness and screams out for her mother. Her mother comes in and is obviously worried what is going on. Rosa exclaims that there is a frog in her bed, and it was even in her mouth at one point. She coughed it out of her throat. The strange part is, the time of the year in which this happened, frogs, reptiles, etc., were still hibernating under the ground. Grandma didn't believe her at first, then checks under her bed and sees the biggest toad that she's ever seen jumping around. Grandma freaks out and gets Rosa's uncle, who traps the frog in a glass jar. They're all in disbelief as to how the frog got there. The next morning, they bury the frog deep into the ground in the jar, not poking holes in the lid in hopes of smothering it. They also take Rosa back to the Bruja for a follow-up and tell her about the frog. The Bruja goes on to say that she had a feeling it was actual frog meat that made her ill. Someone placed it with bad intentions into something she consumed in hopes of bringing sickness to her. It was done out of envy and jealousy. The Bruja also says that she could reveal the identity of the person and in turn put a curse on them. Freaked out, Rosa claims she didn't want any part in this sort of black magic so as to harm another person, and they left. Rosa continues to decline and swelled 70 pounds in a total of 6 months despite not eating much. She also continues to swell in her abdomen and throat. They're worrying the end is near when they hear of another healer in the area who also practices magic. They take Rosa to another medicine woman and explain the toad, her illness, and the curse. The Bruja says simply, your toad is not dead. It lives in the ground still, and until you will get sicker and sicker until you will pass away. She went on to say a person wanted you to take frog-like features until your throat and stomach with fluids. They wanted you willing to try anything at this point. They go home and the uncle digs up the jar, and sure enough, the frog was still alive 3 weeks after they had buried it, with zero oxygen, water, etc. It wasn't idle like when they are in hibernation mode. It was making sounds and jumping. She said it was wild. Shocked and extremely freaked out, they take the frog and, they lit a match, if that tells you anything. Within days, Rosa began to show signs of healing. She started gaining energy, her appetite came back, her swelling reduced, and she was getting better and better each day. Eventually, Rosa was completely back to normal, and until this day, she cannot explain exactly what happened. She and my father-in-law moved to Los Angeles soon after and gave birth to 3 healthy boys. Today, Rosa is in her mid-60s and is super active, never shown signs of sickness again. The trauma from the frog dream, however, haunts her to this day. She cannot see frogs on TV, in pictures, let alone in person, without completely freaking out. Was it food poisoning, a virus, black magic? You tell me. It gives me goosebumps. Oh my gosh. What was it?
When I was 13, I befriended a little girl named Lisa who told me that she had a pair of magical red boots that could take her to different places, and one day she let me wear them, and I still can't explain what happened after. This is Jody's submission to Spooky Scary Storytime, which is a series of listener-submitted, allegedly true stories about the creepiest or most unsettling things people have ever experienced. And Jody says when Lisa was a new student at her elementary school, she befriended her, not because Lisa was the type of person that she would normally be friends with, but because she felt a little bit bad for her. Lisa was a little bit weird. She had a strange way of speaking. She was very quiet, and because of this, the other kids avoided her like the plague, and so Jody felt bad for her. Though she was quiet, she did seem extremely intelligent, and she spoke like an adult in a child's body. It wasn't her voice itself, but the cadence and the words that she used that made it seem like she was older than she actually was. One thing that Jody noticed right off the bat that was a little bit strange about Lisa was that she never referred to her parents as mom and dad. She would say things like, oh, the parent dropped me off at school today. But Jody wasn't one to judge. She was sort of the type to take the outcast under her wing. And as they became friends, Lisa started telling her about a pair of magical red boots that she had that would take her to different places, wherever she wanted to go. But being 13, Jody said she was past the age of fairy tales, and of course she didn't believe her. But she still listened intently anytime Lisa told her a story about places that she went while wearing these little red magical boots, and she half hoped that the stories were true. One Friday at the end of the school week, Jody asked Lisa, "What are your plans for the weekend?" And Lisa said something along the lines of, "Oh, I guess I'm going to wear my little red boots and I'm going to go somewhere new." And Jody took this as an opportunity, and she was like, "Well, I'd love to come over and test these boots out for myself. I'd love to see them." She said, "Where do you live exactly?" And Lisa said, "Oh, I live in this house across from the park." And Jody knew exactly which house she was talking about, but she said that it didn't make sense because that house that she referred to looked abandoned. It was completely overgrown, boarded up, like nobody had lived there for years. And so she clarified, and she was like, "The house directly across from the park, the blue one with the shutters?" And Lisa said, "Yeah, that one." Jody said she had grown up in the neighborhood and was very familiar with the house, and that place had looked abandoned for as long as she could remember. And so she was like, "Well, can I come over? I would love to see the boots." And Lisa said, "No, I don't think so. The parents don't allow me to have friends over, and besides, the boots wouldn't work for you." Jody, of course, took this to mean that Lisa had been lying about the boots. And so she said, "Okay, well, why don't you bring the boots to school so I can test them out?" And Lisa sort of snapped back and she said, "I told you the boots won't work for you." Jody was obviously disappointed, but eventually she let it go. And that's why one day she was surprised, because a few weeks after that, Lisa said, "Hey, what are you doing after school today? Do you want to come to my house?" Jody said something like, "I thought you said your parents wouldn't allow you to have friends over." And Lisa brushed her off and said, "No, it's fine. You can come over and see the boots if you want to. This is your chance." And obviously, intrigued, Jody agreed. This was finally Jody's chance to prove to herself that Lisa had been making the whole thing up, even though she secretly hoped that the boots really worked like Lisa said. The following day, Jody informed her parents before school that she'd be going over to a friend's house afterward, and they allowed it. And after school, she and Lisa walked to the property where Lisa claimed that her family lived. It was a sunny day, it was bright outside, but once they stepped foot onto the property, Jody said she had a horrible feeling in her gut, but Lisa grabbed her hand and said, "It's okay, come on," and pulled her up the stairs to the porch that was falling inward and pushed the front door open. Inside the house, Jody looked around and she said the house was very, very dark with no lights on, and the only light coming through sheer curtains to sort of illuminate what looked to be a dusty, old, dated living room. The furniture was covered in plastic, and there were really no signs of life. She didn't see Lisa's parents, and she said the whole house just had this stillness and coldness about it that made her feel very uncomfortable. But Lisa turned to her and smiled and said, "Okay, come on, let's go see the boots," and she pulled her up the stairs. They walked down the hall toward a closed bedroom door, and as they did, there were no sounds besides their creaking footsteps and their breathing. There were no sounds of people. The house was completely silent, and as they got to the last door on the left, Lisa pushed it open, and they just stood at the doorway for a second. There was nothing in the room besides an old oak dresser in the center of the room, and Jody said the second that she looked at it, she felt like she was not supposed to be there. She felt like she couldn't move, paralyzed almost, like she was in a trance. Then Lisa whispered, "The boots are in there." And Jody said when she said this, she felt a slight tingle of excitement, but it was still mostly the feeling of fear. And she followed Lisa into the room, and they stood in front of the dresser, and Lisa whispered, "Do you want to see them?" But Jody said that at this point something felt very, very off, and so she finally just asked Lisa, like, "Where are your parents?" And Lisa responded, "The parents are here, but we have to be very quiet." Jody says the way that Lisa whispered these words made her feel like she had a pit in the bottom of her stomach, and like she knew she was not supposed to be there. But Lisa gestured toward the bottom drawer and she said, "They're in there, open it." But Jody couldn't bring herself to, so finally Lisa reached over and she pulled open the drawer. And inside the drawer was a very plain looking pair of little girl's cowboy boots. And Lisa said, "Okay, there they are, put them on." And Jody looked at her and said, "I thought you said they wouldn't work for me." And Lisa said, No, they've been adjusted. That's why I can't touch them. You have to touch them. You have to take them out and you have to put them on." And at this point, Jody said she was feeling like everything was getting to be too much, but she was still intrigued. And she was waiting for Lisa to reveal at any moment that this was all a big prank. But she didn't. Instead, she just kept urging Jody to go on, get the boots, put them on. Jody began to reach for the boots, but as she did, Lisa all of a sudden stiffened up like she was listening to something. She said, wait, I need to hear this." And Jody looked at her very confused, and she started listening, but she couldn't hear anything. But then Lisa said, "The parent is calling me. I need to go, but go ahead and put the boots on. I'll be right back." As she walked out of the door, she looked over her shoulder at Jody and whispered, "Make sure when you put the boots on, you close your eyes and do it quietly." And then she disappeared down the hall. Jody says she listened for a minute, but she couldn't hear any signs of life in the house. There was no conversation, no signs of Lisa or anyone else talking. But though she was scared and confused, she closed her eyes and slipped the boots on. And then she sat for a few seconds until she felt a presence in the room. And so she opened her eyes and saw Lisa standing in the doorway. But Lisa wasn't looking at Jody. Instead, she was looking to her side and up like she was talking to someone. But there was no one standing next to her. Lisa nodded her head as if to say yes, and then came in the room and said, "Are you okay?" okay? Jody said, yeah, I'm fine, but the boots don't work. And Lisa said, of course they do. You just don't remember. It takes practice to remember where you go. Then she told Jody it was time to leave. And Jody said, no, my mom said I could stay over here for an hour. And Lisa said, it's been over an hour already. You have to go. And so Jody thought she was just trying to get rid of her. And so she reluctantly agreed. And she walked the 10 minutes home. But when she got home, her mother scolded her for being almost 2 hours late. And after that, Lisa started distancing herself from Jody at school. She would just act like she couldn't or didn't want to talk to Jody. And Jody had no idea what she did wrong. She actually asked Lisa quite a few times if she could go back over to her house to put the red boots on again, because she wanted to see if she could remember if she did it a second time. But Lisa just kept telling her, no, the parents don't allow me to have guests over. And not long after that, Lisa stopped coming to school entirely. And so after a few days of her missing, Jody went up to her teacher and she asked, like, hey, what happened to Lisa? And the teacher had absolutely no idea who she was talking about. Jody claimed that the other kids that were in her class also didn't remember Lisa. And when she brought it up to her own mother, who remembered her going over to Lisa's house that day to play, her mother claimed, like, yeah, I remember that, but you must have the house mistaken. Nobody's lived in that house for years. That didn't make sense to Jody because she says that it was a very distinct house on the corner lot and there was no way that she had it mistaken. She went to the house to see if anyone still lived there, but when she knocked on the door, no one answered. And she asked her mom a few more times if she could go back, but her mom was insistent that nobody lived in that house. Lisa says, although it's been years and she has no explanation whatsoever, she said she knows for sure that Lisa was real and she was in that house. What she doesn't know is what happened during the hour that she was wearing those red boots. Jody's her real name. She may be in the comments. Let her know if you have thoughts, if you have theories. I would also love to hear them. And if you have a spooky, scary story time you think no one would believe, or something that happened that still leaves you unsettled, please send it in. We would love to hear it.
So I found another new to me cryptid out of the Appalachian Mountains in this next story, and I need your opinions. I need to know, have you any idea what this might be? So this man, we're going to call him Jason for the story, does maintenance work on cabins up near the mountains outside of Kentucky. A lot of these properties sit completely isolated once summer comes to an end. There's not a lot of traffic or anybody around, just a lot of deep woods. On one November evening in 2005, Jason was driving back down the ridge. He had gone to check out one of the properties because the owners had called, suspicious that someone was messing around up there. He discovered doors left open and trash knocked over everywhere, and it was pitch black by the time that he made it up there. So on the way back down, Jason actually pulls over because he thought he heard the sound of an owl, and this piqued his interest. Hearing owls is very common out there. Barred owls especially are all around up there. But he said something was off about this sound. Upon listening closer, it didn't sound like an owl. It sounded like a person trying to impersonate an owl. It sounded rehearsed and there was no variation. It was just the exact same call repeated with no natural rhythm like he was used to listening to time and time again. So he's just sitting there listening, and then he hears it again. It was the exact same sounding call, but now coming from further down the hill. Thinking this has got to be a person and maybe somebody's there illegally or hunting where they shouldn't be. He now needs to go check this out. So he grabs his flashlight and he steps out of the vehicle. Now Jason walks about 20 yards off the road into the woods. Then everything goes completely silent, and we all know what that means. He said there was no rustling, no bugs, no wind, nothing. Dead silence. And that's when the beam of his flashlight hit something up in the trees. Now, at first, as he's looking at this thing, he is assuming it is an owl, but it was a massive owl if it was one. It was perched up in the tree. He said the proportions were all wrong and it was too tall. He said it was sitting upright and it definitely looked more like a person than an owl. He distinctly saw long legs hanging below the branch, which would absolutely not have been an owl. Way too long and out of place for any bird at all. And guys, it moved, and no, it didn't fly. It stood up on the branch. He said whatever this thing was unfolded itself upwards, and now it was standing at least 6 feet tall. But it had feathers. He said he could clearly see that it had feathers in the beam of light. But underneath the feathers, the facial structure was absolutely all wrong, especially for an owl. He describes the shape as so human looking. He said something that definitely had no business looking back at him the way that it did. And then he said its head turned and tracked him, way too focused in and seemingly intelligent. It was just too deliberate. So Jason is frozen. He is unable to process what he is seeing. So he starts to slowly back up to his truck, never keeping his eyes off of this thing. This thing watched him back away and never took its eyes off of him. And as soon as Jason got to the road, it dropped down out of the freaking tree. And Jason says the weirdest thing was that this was completely silent. Like, it made no thumping sound. He said for something that large falling from the tree from that height, it should have made a nice big thumping sound. And yet, silence. And then it just completely vanished, disappearing into the darkness as though it were never there in the first place. Jason jumps in his truck and he is tearing down the mountain now. But he says halfway down the mountain, he heard something coming from both sides of his truck. His windows were down. And so he slows down to a stop, which, first of all, my windows would be up and no, I would not be stopping. Guys, what he heard was a soft voice saying, "Hey, Jason." Oh my freaking God. And he slams his foot on the gas and he does not stop again until he gets home. So when he gets back, he gets a hold of his uncle who had been living in those mountains his entire life. And he told him about this. Well, he started to tell him about this. Now, this man is no nonsense, absolutely does not believe in cryptids, or so Jason thought. He fully expected his uncle to just laugh the story off. His uncle is listening and he's not saying a word, not cracking a smile, just intently listening. And then all of a sudden he goes, "Did it have really long legs?" And then he said, "Did its face look all wrong underneath its feathers? Too human?" He hadn't given his uncle those details yet. And then very matter-of-factly, he kind of just leaned back in his chair and got comfortable and told him that his grandfather and some other men had seen something with that exact description back in the 1950s. He said it was when they were on a raccoon hunting trip in the Great Smoky Mountain. So he says that they had spotted a tall, upright figure that they initially thought was a man until the hunting dogs started to whimper and retreat and would not go further towards it. He said they watched it for about 15 minutes until it just stepped sideways behind a tree and vanished. Of course it did. And he did say it vanished without a sound, almost like a ghost. He also said the old timers had a name for it. They called them the Night Watchers. He said they lived and stayed deep in the hollers and only showed themselves to people who were entirely alone or in imminent danger. And then Jason's uncle looked him dead in the eyes and said, "If you ever hear something in the woods trying to sound human, but it ain't quite right, you leave." And then Jason said that was the end of the conversation. His uncle never brought it up again. So a few weeks later, that original property owner called again. He said something heavy had been getting onto the porch roof at night. It was heavy enough to shake the rafters. And he did say he ended up quitting taking jobs up there after dark. Good call. So creepy. That was a good one. So you got to tell me your thoughts in the comments. Have we ever heard of anything like this before? Let me know. And if you have a creepy story of your own, you got to share it. And if you're new here, follow for more creepy story time.
The person that sent me the story called it the UAP experience that changed my life. By the way, if you have a story that you'd like to share with our community about glitches in the Matrix, dreams, aliens, cryptids, or the paranormal, you can send it to this email address. And remember, we believe you. Hi, Anti-Matrix. Hi. Not sure if that's one word or two. It is definitely two. I've been watching your posts for a few years and I love your channel and your great vibes. Thank you for sharing your light. Thank you so much for saying that. The following is an account of the UAP experience I had in 2021. It changed my life in an instant and opened my mind to a reality that I never knew existed. The first thing you need to know is that I never even believed in UAPs prior to my first sighting and subsequent experiences. I never had any interest in the subject and admittedly regarded anyone who claimed to witness anything as either a hoaxer or mentally ill. I have always been highly interested in physics, specifically quantum mechanics, and many of the people I admire Most are theoretical physicists. I listen to them and trust their judgment implicitly, and they not only convinced me that NHI visitation was essentially impossible because of the distance problem, but also that our consciousness was no more than chemical interactions within the brain. I therefore became a staunch materialist and inherently an atheist. On July 3rd, 2021, this all changed. The term ontological shock doesn't even come close to the paradigm shift I experienced from what I witnessed and the drastic change to my consciousness that followed. I don't know what ontological shock means. Let me look it up. Okay, ontological shock is when something shakes up your whole view of reality, which makes sense in the context. I went outside to my backyard to discuss something with my girlfriend. It was a perfect, clear, cloudless day with hardly any wind. As I was speaking to her, she pointed behind me and said, "What's that?" I turned and I saw a ball of light approaching. At first, I thought it was the sun reflecting off the windshield of a helicopter, but as it grew nearer, I knew something was wrong with this assumption because there was absolutely no sound accompanying the object. I know enough about basic propulsion to know that what I was seeing did not make sense. The object was floating, yet it was moving deliberately toward us. I told my girlfriend to grab her phone to record as I stared at the approaching light. It was the brightest light I had ever seen, and I was able to stare at it without any pain to my eyes. My ear is like muffled, weird. I cupped my hands around my eyes to block the sun as I stared unblinkingly at the light, not wanting to miss a single second of what I was witnessing. The light hovered directly over me, no more than 50 feet at the most, and I could make out a metallic sheen beneath the light. As it was above me, the light grew even brighter and seemed to flash. The closest way I can describe the feeling was that it was what I would imagine being under a spaceship in a movie would be like. As the light flashed in my eyes, I saw geometric shapes of diamond white light in my vision, like trapezoids. When it flashed this light on me, I audibly said, "Oh my God." The object continued to morph, for lack of a better word, and at the end of the sighting, I saw it change into a perfect golden sphere of light and then fly away as silently as it had arrived. I was in awe, and that was just the beginning. But wait, there's more. Later that night, when I lay down for bed, I closed my eyes, and in my vision, I could see a golden pinpoint of light as if it were a few feet away and set against the darkness of my closed eyes. I thought that was odd. It was like the light left in one's eyes after flash photography, but this was hours after my sighting. I dismissed it and fell asleep. For the following month, I was admittedly obsessed with seeing something else in the sky. That is so understandable. I would be too. I spent that month of July outside most of the time searching the skies, and to this day, almost 5 years after, not a day has passed that I haven't looked up when I go outside. During that month of July 2021, I began watching Ancient Aliens nightly as well, a show I had never watched and heavily ridiculed. I also began watching every documentary on the topic of UFOs. Yes, I had gone off the deep end. Understandably, my friend, you saw a giant light shining thingy in the sky. During that month, I would often say out loud to whatever intelligence I had seen, "Come on, why don't you just land? Let's hang out," or something to that effect. On July 31st, I seemingly got a reply. I was outside recording the skies as usual when a helicopter approached. I had worked myself into a paranoia since my first sighting and convinced myself that many of the helicopters I was seeing were actually UAPs in disguise. I no longer believe this, but please understand that my mind had been utterly blown at that first sighting. As I was recording on July 31st, this helicopter shined its searchlight on me and grew nearer. I kept my phone on it and continued to record. Closer and closer it came, and its light even brighter. I got scared that it was a spaceship coming to abduct me. I know, silly, paranoid. I said, "Holy shit," as I cut the recording and hid behind my garage. As the helicopter flew away, I ran out from behind my garage and continued recording. I gotta feel the same way though. I'm always like, "Hey aliens, come like hang out with me," but I feel like if it actually happened, I would shit my pants. 40 minutes passed as I stayed outside, though it did not feel like that long looking back on it. Then I heard an animal screaming, and I saw the bushes shaking. I ran over to the fence where the bushes were, picked up a chair, and slammed it down on the concrete surrounding our pool and yelled, "Hey!" The noise stopped immediately, as well as the rustling of the bushes. Then I heard something I've only heard in movies like The Predator or Jurassic Park. I heard a large mouth open, an intake of breath, and a crunch. What do you mean? It sounded like 100 bones being smashed in one bite. I couldn't even believe what I had just heard. I stood motionless. Then I saw another critter walking atop a bush directly towards where I had just heard the sound. I believe it was a possum. I didn't understand this. Animals run from such a commotion. They don't head towards it. It kept going like it was under some spell. I tried to stop it saying, "No, no, no, stop," but it kept going until it got to the source of the unbelievable sound and crawled down into the bush. Then the bushes began shaking again. I heard the animal squeal in pain, and I heard that mouth open again and then crunch. I slowly backed up and turned and ran to my back door. I ran inside, shut the door, set the alarm, drew all the curtains, turned off all the lights, and hid in the back office of our home. There's a window in it that looks directly out to the pool area and that bush. I stayed there staring at the bush for an hour. What could I do? I wanted to tell someone, but who would believe me? And who could I call? The police? Animal control? The Ghostbusters? I was alone and terrified. Eventually, I talked myself down. I said there's no way I had accurately heard what I thought I did. I ventured outside again, recording the bush as I approached. There were a few other critters atop the bush at the far end of the fence, and I told myself they must have been responsible for the crunch sound. I even said, "Aw, are you what made that sound?" Right after I said this, the bushes began rustling again, and I heard another crunch. Back inside I went. I couldn't believe it. What the hell was out there and what was going on? Believe it or not, I returned outside again a few minutes later and again began recording the bush. It kept rustling and I kept recording. I figured there was something in the bush that I couldn't explain and went back inside. I was too frightened to sleep and stayed up until the sun rose the following morning, only then feeling safe to close my eyes and drift off. Upon waking later in the day, I immediately grabbed a ladder and went over to the bush. Okay, yes, I was going to say, can we please look in the bush? I climbed it and looked over into the next door neighbor's yard where I had heard the sound, and there was nothing. No blood, no fur, no sign of a struggle. This was even weirder. I spent much of my childhood out in the country, and I was no stranger to animal crime scenes. The fact that there were absolutely no sign of any struggle was extremely odd. For the following 3 days, I was too scared to go outside at night. My girlfriend was out of town for the summer working, so I was all alone. While inside during those days, I laid down and closed my eyes, and I noticed that my golden pinpoint of light was still in my vision. For some reason, I had never paid attention to it. This piqued my interest. It had been almost a month since I saw that UAP. That light, which I dismissed as something akin to a result of flash photography, was something else. As I mentioned, I had watched many UFO documentaries over that month, and I had recently seen a new one released on Showtime called UFO. In one episode, there was an alleged photo of a ship with two greenish translucent figures in the cockpit. Translucent, got it. Each figure had a golden light glowing in the middle of their heads. The light I was seeing in my vision was eerily similar to the lights in these figures' heads. Regardless if the video in said documentary is legitimate or not, I knew something was going on. I then recalled learning about the pineal gland years earlier when I was in my early 20s. From what I had learned, the pineal gland was considered a possible scientific explanation for the third eye. Yes, I never even believed in such things as chakras in the third eye, but after what I had seen almost a month prior, I was open to exploring further. I began to meditate. Before seeing that UAP on July 3rd, I was lucky if I was able to meditate for 5 minutes, but when I began to meditate this time, I was able to sit for hours with absolutely no thoughts and just stare at this light in my vision. For about 2 weeks, I meditated daily, averaging 4 hours a day, typically split into 2-hour sessions. Back to the thing in the bush. I called my girlfriend the day after the incident and I told her that I had essentially heard a monster in our bush. She didn't say it, but I knew she thought I was crazy, and she expressed her concern for my well-being considering the shock I had been through following us seeing that UAP. I was angry that she did not believe me, and I got off the phone. For the next couple of days during the time I noticed the light in my vision, I remembered that I had been recording that helicopter not long before hearing the sound in the bush. I thought, what the hell? And I checked the footage. I was astounded at what I saw. As the helicopter approached, a light appeared out of thin air beside it. It appeared as a white color at first, but then became a distinct green color. It zigged and zagged at impossible angles and speed, and then shot down and out of the frame as I cut the recording. The light, or rather green orb, shot directly down to the exact same bush where I had heard the crunch sound. This was definitely not camera flare. This was an orb, and it traveled in impossible ways right to the source of the entire commotion. Something had landed in my bush. About a year later, there was a story that came out of Las Vegas about something that landed in someone's yard and scared the hell out of them. I think I actually remember that. The officer called to the scene, caught a green orb on his body cam. When I saw the footage, it was the exact same color as the orb I caught on my phone. As astonished as I was, I kept diligently meditating day after day. The golden light grew closer in my vision daily. One night, I was on my back meditating and focusing on this light when all of a sudden I saw this bright blue light seemingly flash out of my forehead and up towards the ceiling. I couldn't believe it. A couple of days following the blue light, that golden pinpoint of light grew closer until it just stopped dead in its tracks and began moving back and forth in slow motion as if defying time itself. The following day, I was meditating in my backyard with my eyes closed. The light in my head grew brighter and brighter, and all of a sudden, I began seeing concentric circles of golden light flowing outward in my vision. Just the sight of it was amazing and filled me with an ecstasy I can barely describe. It felt like pure energy was flowing in and out of my head, and I remained in this state for about 10 minutes before opening my eyes. When I opened them, I looked at the grass, and it seemed like neon green, and all the colors of the world seemed richer and more vibrant. All I could guess was that my third eye had opened. For the next week or so, I was on cloud 9. I was happier than I'd ever been, filled with an energy and an ecstasy I never experienced on any drug. And still, this was just the beginning. Not long after this, I was meditating again, and I had a rapid flash of 3 consecutive visions. Each vision was a dark black set against a fiery red background, and they were so fast that all I could catch was the last, which lingered and seemed to burn into my sight. It was clearly the head of a bull. I still don't know what it meant, but my first thought was the Apis bull of Egypt. I don't know what that is, so I looked it up, and this is what it looks like. Following this vision, I began seeing colored static in my vision when I closed my eyes, and the blue light I would see while meditating would morph into the most lifelike visions imaginable. The visions were more real than real life, in fact. I've always been an active dreamer, but my dreams following the blossoming of my third eye became astoundingly vivid, and I had many lucid dreams as well. My body began humming and vibrating with an unseen energy too. One night, I had an extremely vivid dream of a crystalline city, and I was woken up by how violently my body was vibrating. I felt like a paint mixer. During this time of stepping into this energetic world and experiencing visions, vivid and lucid dreams, and vibrating with energy, my rational scientific mind still found it hard to grasp everything or even truly accept. I was worried something was wrong with me, so I had an MRI with contrast done. Everything came back normal. I saw my general physician and ran every test, all normal and fit as a fiddle. I saw my eye doctor and I told him everything, even showing him the video of my UAP my girlfriend recorded. He watched the video and said, "Wow, yep, that's the real thing." My eye doctor said my vision was 20/20, and he said what I saw must have passed some energy into me. This was my eye doctor telling me this, for goodness sake, and he's highly respected in Los Angeles. Less than a year after this, I had my first of many out-of-body experiences while meditating. Some of the things I've seen while out of my body are indescribable, so I will just say that these experiences were as astonishing as seeing the UAP in July. These OBEs, vivid dreams, and visions continue to this day, almost 5 years later. I actually just had an experience a few days ago where I was transported to another dimension. It was like experiencing 6D reality, no DMT required, and I've never even done DMT. Well, that's probably because your pineal gland releases DMT, like at the time of death and other times, and if your third eye opened, then that probably uncrystallized and is active and going. Obviously, you're having all these experiences, but that's definitely, you are on DMT, but not like you didn't take it. This is just my story in a nutshell. I could write a book, but I will leave it at that for now. You should write a book. We would read that book. Sorry, I had to pause and get my hair done. That's why I look different. Okay, let's go. I must reiterate that I never even believed in UAPs before my sighting, and I certainly didn't go searching for one, nor did I seek the awakening of consciousness that was thrust upon me. Albeit, I am eternally grateful for glimpsing the astounding depth of our reality. Thank you so much for taking the time to read my story. Thank you so much for taking the time to share it with us. Wait, he sent the pictures for us to look at. Hold on. Okay, so he said 2 stills are highly enhanced, and you can see that the object is shaped like a sideways metallic horseshoe with a bright light at the top and a beam of what I can only imagine is plasma connecting the top curl to the bottom. In the back of the object is a distinct hole with depth to it. Remember that the object was set against a clear blue sky, so one would expect to see blue sky beyond the hole, but all that is visible is a bright white light. I believe this object, which is most likely a plasmoid, utilizes some form of wormhole technology, and that hole with the white light is essentially a glimpse at a self-sustaining portal. Of course, this is just speculation. Okay, so this is the first picture. Look at that. This is giving me, the shape is giving a nut, you know, like nuts and bolts. Like it looks like a nut to me. Yeah, look at the bright light, like at the top right corner. And you're right, like the hole does look like there is some depth to it. This is the second picture. This is the third. This is like a little more close up. That's wacky and wild. How bright that is. Like, you're right. If that was like a hole or whatever, you would think that you'd be able to see the blue through it. So it's clearly not just like a hole. And then this is the most close-up one. Let me like move myself out of the way. This is so crazy. It definitely looks like it's like not morphing, but close up, it doesn't look like a bolt anymore. It looks more of like a shape. Does that make sense? Which would make sense if it was some sort of plasmoid. Oh my God, this is crazy. Even these pictures aside, right? The whole thing is crazy. Like the fact that the light that he saw from this UAP, craft, plasmoid, whatever, was so like burned into him that he would see it when his eyes were closed for so long, and then like meditating on it made all this crazy stuff happen, the visions and the third eye opening and all the crazy stuff, and that it's still happening, and now astral travel, and that it's all that stuff is still happening is so cool. And even with like writing back to him and speaking to him afterwards, like he just kept saying like he can't stress how impactful these events have been on him, and he never would have believed someone telling him this story before, and that he hopes that everybody on earth gets to experience what he experienced. I hope so too. I really want to experience something like this. I would love to know if anybody had any similar experiences or can resonate with this. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
We are back with another Trini Paranormal, Trini Scary Story, Trini Folklore for you today. And guess what? We have a paranormal story from Tobago. So our follower said, around 10 a.m., I was in my stepfather's car. He was driving. My mother is in the passenger seat and my nephew accompanied me in the backseat of the car. We were going to the lawyer office in Canaan, but there's a park on the main road where I believe everyone that has been to Tobago knows where it is. Very true. We were driving along there when I saw a chubby guy walking. He was in a navy blue shirt with floral prints and black three-quarter pants, walking slowly with a slumped, aggressive posture. The guy looked to be around 50 for the most, and I promise you, while the car slowed down, I was steadily watching him walk enough to notice that he did not have a head. Upon my realization, I quickly turned to my nephew in the back to ask him if he saw the man, and he said, "No, what man?" We didn't reach too far, and I pointed to the direction where the man was, only for both of us to turn around and not see anything. It was like he vanished into thin air, and I was so confused. Now that I'm 21, and though this would have happened when I was 12, I still question what I saw that day. Even typing this gives me goosebumps. A whole apparition without a head. 10 a.m. broad daylight. What this reminds me of is the Headless Horseman. I would have heard some stories about that in Trinidad. But what do you think our followers saw walking in the road without a head? Also, if you reach this far, stick around. We have something very new and exciting that is going to be coming up in this channel. So stick around.
Has anyone else been having really weird dreams lately? Like very vivid, strange, you can't explain, creepy dreams? Over the past year, or I would say the past couple of months, I've been having these frequent dreams that just don't make any sense. I see a lot of people from the past that I knew very little, and it's like they play these significant roles in my dreams. I've also seen a lot of people that have passed away from my past, and it's just really eerie, these dreams I've been having. And another dream that I've been frequently having are these dreams where I'm being chased by something. And one specific dream that I remember, there's this old woman, and she was like on a porch. And as I walk by, she just looks like a normal old lady. But each time I walk by, she gets kind of more creepier and decrepit and spooky looking. And eventually she turns into this kind of just eerie looking monster with fangs and these bright red eyes. And people in this town around me are like disappearing. And I find out this old lady is taking them. And eventually I approach her. She starts to chase me, and I can never get away from her. And then eventually I wake up. And I don't really know the significance of this dream, but for some reason, this the image of that old woman stuck with me. So I'm just curious, has anybody else been having just strange dreams lately? A lot of people ask me, where can I go and look for Bigfoot? Now, there are a lot of beginner, intermediate places where you can start and actually do your own Bigfoot investigation. One perfect place that I would recommend is the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Now, there are a lot of easy trails. There's not a lot of dangerous wildlife or extreme temperatures or extreme terrain. And there have been a lot of Bigfoot sightings in this area. There have been a lot of recent sightings in this area. Now, most of these trails you can find are like 3 to 4 to 5 miles long, and they just loop around. And as long as you stay on the trail, you're going to be good. You're not going to get lost. And there are other places like the Hoosier National Forest, Turkey Run in Indiana, Jubilee College State Park in Illinois, Yellow River National Forest in Iowa. Now, like I said, these are very good places where it's easier terrain. There's not a lot of dangerous wildlife, and you can kind of get your foot in the door and just sort of practice. All you really need is a camera, maybe a digital audio recorder or a field recorder. Take pictures, look for footprints, record any strange sounds or audio you might catch. There's a lot of good books on Bigfoot that you can buy and research, as well as there are Bigfoot calls you can find online, and you can use a Bigfoot call on like a Bluetooth speaker. So if you want to get started in looking for Bigfoot, I suggest just go out to an area where there's been a lot of Bigfoot activity. Familiarize and accustomize yourself to the outdoors and to this area. Just be safe. Don't do anything drastic or crazy. Just take it slow and learn. And then eventually, work your way up to maybe going to the Sierra Nevadas or the Cascade Mountains. But whatever you do, make sure you don't litter, make sure you pick up the area, and make sure you don't disturb nature. But go out there, have fun, and search for Bigfoot. It's nothing more terrifying than a fairy. Now, they are not like they are depicted in the movies. They are considered to be evil, dangerous spirits that try and lure people into the woods. And often they've been depicted in pop culture as being these peaceful, little majestic creatures with wings and glitter, but they are actually much more terrifying. Now, people who've had encounters with these fairies, they describe them from being 12 inches to 7 feet tall. But most commonly, people describe them as being around 3 feet tall, having these big, round-shaped heads with these bulbous black eyes, these sharp, jagged teeth, and these very sharp nails. Their skin color is often gray to black. They're said to hide in caves or in rocky areas, and they come out at night trying to use music or mimicry to lure people to them. And a lot of the disappearances that occur in these national parks and in the forest, they're attributed to fairies or fays. Because when you look at a lot of these disappearances, they take place near water or caves. This is where these are said to live. They often go after young, healthy men. And you notice that when these people disappear, they often find them missing shoes or articles of clothing. These are things that fairies like to take. But probably the scariest thing is whenever someone disappears, there always seems to be bad weather afterwards. And fairies are often associated with this bad weather. So when you see someone disappear and they say they have to call up the search because the weather was bad, a lot of times that's associated to fairy activity. Now, there was a famous story out of Amarillo, Texas. There was this farmer, and he had some family over. Now, his family and the children, they were all playing out at this creek near the house. And as they're playing, they begin to hear this lullaby coming from downstream. And so the kids are sort of amazed by this sound. Where is that coming from? They start following the sound down the creek. And that's when, over by the stream, they see these little creatures. And they're saying, come here, come here, come here, come with us, come here, come here. They're talking in these strange little voices, and they're laughing, and they are jumping around. So the kids walk over to them, and they start telling them, come with us, you can come with us, and we'll show you somewhere like that's amazing, and we can play forever. So the kids start following them. Now, they think this is only a few minutes, but their parents realize that they've been missing for several hours, and they're out searching for them. So finally, the parents see these kids walking with these creatures along this creek. And they start calling out to the kids, get away from them, get away from them. And instantly, these creatures become enraged. And they start trying to grab the children and drag them off. And they're scratching them, and they're biting them, and hissing and growling. Eventually, the kids get away, and they get home. But for many years, they could hear outside their windows at night these things beckoning them to come out and follow them. So what do you think? Are fairies real?
I did the TikTok ritual and it worked. I don't think that I need to tell you guys not to do this. Like, if you are listening to the stories that I tell, I think you guys just know better not to do shit like this. I guess at the end of the day, you do what you want, but like, don't fucking do this. Don't do this. So this guy says that for a long time he had this crush on a girl that would visit the store that he worked at because she was really pretty. Now, he tried a lot of different things to get her attention. He would send her flowers, he would send her gifts, he would talk to her with a lot of care. Now, she never rejected him, but she also never told him like, hey, yeah, I like you, let's date. He became very desperate, and he said that he saw this TikTok ritual called Susurros de los Sueños, which I try to translate it, and it's whispers of dreams. Are you telling me... Okay, I have not seen this movie Obsession, but that's what it's kind of sounding like. Leave in the comments if it is. He says that the ritual was basically for you to enter this person's mind and give them orders, and they're supposed to listen to you. What the fuck? Like, how are you gonna force somebody to like you, bro? This motherfucker. He says that he had tried other rituals on her before and that none of them worked. How about you try talking to her, you know, find out what her interests are, see if you guys are interested in the same thing, and not go straight into trying to fucking give her orders. What the yeah, fuck that. Anyway, he had his mind set on this TikTok ritual, and at night he prepared everything. He got a paper and a pencil, he got a cup filled with water and a white candle. He turns off all the lights, he writes down this girl's name, and he says the following phrase: she's gonna love me, she's gonna listen to me, and she's gonna date me. He folded the paper and put it underneath his pillow. He lights up the candle, and that's when he says a phrase that I'm not going to repeat on here because what the fuck, I'm not going to tell you how to do all this. After saying the phrase, he blew out the candle and he went to sleep. That very night, he actually had a dream about that girl. He dreamt that they were together, boyfriend and girlfriend, that they were walking in the street holding hands. And the way that she would look at him in the dream seemed like she was just in love with him. A week after he does this ritual is when things started to change. She started to go to the store a lot more frequently, and she would stay there just having conversations with him. And he says that they finally started to feel like they were connecting. He repeated this ritual 3 times after that week. And by the time you know it, they were dating and they are boyfriend and girlfriend. They're still together till this day, and she does not know anything about the ritual that he did. He's like, after trying and trying so many times, I finally got her to be my girlfriend. Now he says that he's not sure if it was just them connecting or if it was the fucking 4 rituals that you did for her to be with you. I'm sorry, I got a little hyped up. But what do you mean? I don't know if it's because we connected or because you fucking tried to control her 4 fucking times. Like, what the fuck? He says that he doesn't know if it was the ritual or just him praying that she would fall in love with him, but he was able to do it, and they are together
till this day. That's how it ends. They're still together. He even submitted this like anonymously so that nobody knew who he was. Oh my god, like I just feel like when you have somebody with you against their will, it's not gonna work out. Why is her not liking you not the final answer? You know what I mean? Or in this case, she didn't even say she didn't like him. Maybe they just needed time. Like, I don't know if you guys believe in this, but like I do. So I just feel like it's never gonna work out if you force someone to be with you. But what do you guys think?
Get ready with me while I tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. This happened when I was 5 months pregnant. And up until that point, nothing unusual had ever happened in my home. It was a regular happy home, just me, my boyfriend, and my sons living a normal life. That's how it always starts. Then one random decision changed everything for us. I live in New Orleans, where it's pretty common to see people selling all kinds of things on the street. Crystals, herbs, candles, oils, and bundles of sage. One afternoon, I was walking by when a man was selling sage bundles. I don't know what made me stop. I wasn't looking for one. I wasn't spiritual. I didn't know anything about cleansing rituals or how sage is traditionally used. For some reason, I just bought it. Here's a rule, okay? If you ever feel compelled to buy something, especially having to do with like the spiritual world or certain beliefs, if you feel like it's out of your control, best thing to do is to just avoid it. Almost like I had no control over the entire interaction and purchase. Yeah, huge red flag. That evening, I lit the sage and walked around my house, waving the smoke through the rooms without really knowing what I was doing. We cannot be playing around in this stuff, you guys. We cannot be playing around in this stuff. I didn't say any prayers. I didn't set any intentions. I just thought it smelled nice and figured it couldn't hurt. That night changed everything. I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep when I started hearing voices. They weren't loud enough to understand, just whispers, almost like people were having conversations somewhere inside my house, just outside of me being able to understand what was being said. So I sat up and listened. And then suddenly, knock, knock, knock. I'm out. Who's there? I don't want to know. 3 loud and heavy knocks echoed throughout the house. It sounded like someone was hitting the house itself with all their strength. The sound was so violent, it made me jump out of bed. My heart was racing, and before I could even process what I'd heard, I heard my oldest son choking in his bedroom. I ran down the hallway in complete panic, terrified that something had happened. But when I burst into his room, he was fast asleep, peacefully breathing. Nothing was wrong. It didn't even look like he had moved at all since he had gone to bed. I stood there frozen, trying to gather my thoughts and figure out what the hell was happening. Then I heard movement from my middle son's room. I rushed in that direction, and what I saw, I still wish wasn't true. It looked like something invisible was lifting his little body up, straight off of his mattress, just for a second. Some unseen hands were carrying him, and then he was set back down. I don't even know how I would react to this sort of thing happening, because I immediately ran to pick him up and laid him back down properly, terrified and shaking. I didn't know what I had just witnessed. I didn't know what was happening inside my house, and I barely made it back into the hallway before hearing something else. Children laughing. Okay, all right, I'm good. I'm done. Children laughing, tiny footsteps, little girls running up and down the hallway. Creepy children, ghost children. That is the scariest thing to me, okay? I can hear like a lady cackling. I can hear like a man speaking to me, anything. It is a giggle and it is a child. Get me out. Little girls running up and down the hallway, back and forth, surrounding me and echoing through the house. I don't have daughters. The entire night felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. It was completely unexplainable, and all happened so fast, almost on purpose, like it wanted to disorient me. Whatever was there wanted to make me think I was going crazy or leave me with enough doubt that I'd act like it hadn't actually happened. When I finally made it back to my bedroom, I didn't sleep at all for the rest of the night. Girl! The next morning, I called my aunt and begged her to come over. I told her everything. She blessed the house while I played gospel music as loudly as I could, filling every room with it. And after that, for a while, everything seemed normal again. Weeks passed without me experiencing anything. I started convincing myself that maybe pregnancy hormones were at play, or stress, even exhaustion had caused me to believe everything I'd experienced. Then one afternoon, I got incredibly sick. Out of nowhere, I could barely move. My body felt heavy. I was so weak, like all my energy was actively being sucked out of me. I was sitting in my bedroom trying to rest when it happened. Across the room, my closet door slowly creaked open. There wasn't a draft, no AC kicking on, no one else was home. It just slowly swung open, almost like someone inside was carefully pulling it open from the other side. I stared at it for maybe 2 seconds before I felt this intense urge to get the hell out of there. I have never moved so fast in my life. I grabbed my keys, ran out of the house, and stayed outside until my boyfriend and kids came home. And that was years ago. But the strange feelings never really stopped. To this day, sometimes late at night when I'm lying in bed, I feel something touch my legs. The lightest brush or caress across my skin. Sometimes I feel pressure on my pillow, almost like someone is leaning against it beside me while I sleep. At this point, I've learned to ignore it. I don't open my eyes, I don't react. I don't want to see what's been standing beside my bed all this time. And sometimes I find myself wondering if that random bundle of sage was supposed to cleanse my home or invite something in.
When I was 17, I was hiking with some friends and we found an old disposable camera right next to like a trail marker. We figured somebody just dropped it and forgot about it, or it was dropped like years ago, so my friend thought it would be fun to take the camera and to go develop it. So that's what we did. We went and we developed it, we got the pictures back, and they were like normal, just like trees, a dog, a campsite, nothing weird. As we kept flipping through the pictures, we realized that the trail that we were on was the same trail that was in the pictures, and things looked more recent than as if somebody lost the camera years ago. The trees matched, the signs matched, even a fallen log that was in the middle of the trail was in the pictures, and it was the same one that we passed over as well. Each picture was closer and closer to the trailhead where we were. It looked as if somebody was coming out of the woods, right? And we pulled up to one, and it was 4 people standing next to the trailhead where we found the camera. Now get this, the 4 people that it was taken of was me and my friends. And the angle that it was taken was from deep inside of the trees, like somebody was watching us. Now, we found this picture on our way back out from the hike, so we're assuming it must have been taken as we were going into the hike. Now, it's been days since we were on that hike because we had to go take the camera in and get it developed, and that took a minute. So we aren't as creeped out as we would have been. However, to know that somebody was watching us is still scary, because what if they followed us home or we're still being watched?
Tonight we're going to talk about how a full century before the Patterson-Gimlin film and a century and a half before Sasquatch started popping up, making cameos on, beef jerky commercials, he was popping up making cameos in the Civil War on both sides. And tonight I'm going to give you a couple of the most well-documented cases. Now, see, a lot of correspondence changed hands, private correspondence. It didn't wind up in the museums, and it wound up in private collections. And that's what happened to 2 of the best stories. Now, the first one comes from the Union side, and it happened around Harper's Ferry, Virginia, and there was a train depot there. Now, this was early 1863, January, February, and there were a couple of privates. One of them was James Moore. He was with the Pennsylvania Union Army, and him and his buddy were stationed guarding this train depot. Now, there was a train that was loaded down with supplies for the Union Army and supposed to be headed out somewhere soon. It was their job to guard it, make sure nothing happened to it. Of course, there's also the whole town of Harper's Ferry even though it's changed hands like 8 times over the course of the war, to whoever the opposing party was at the time. Harper's Ferry has seen some action outside of this, let's just put it that way. But this night was totally different. Now, Private Moore's first call to alarm was all of his fellow soldiers. There was a ruckus amongst the whole camp, the whole fort, and what he could discern the easiest, everyone was shouting, man beast, or wild man. So he's making his way through all this commotion trying to find the source of it. He finally hears a couple of shots pierce the air, the sharp crack of a couple of shots piercing the air, and the shouting subsides. Well, he gets it after the fact pretty much, but there is a 9-foot fence on one of the walls of this fort, and this man beast was said to be every bit of 8 foot tall, at least 8 foot tall, covered in layers of very dark fur, which some was left behind at the scene. It scaled this 9-foot wall in a single jump to get to the supplies on the other side. There was food and survival supplies on the other side, and this thing was basically just on a scavenging mission. It didn't pose a threat to anyone. It didn't present itself in that way. But it was just trying to get under the radar and get to those supplies. Well, it was detected, as you can tell from the letter, and it turned that camp upside down on its head for a night. Now, they said they took measurements at the scene. This thing broke open crates with its bare hands, which usually took regular men, pry bars and whatnot to get these crates open that were nailed shut. It was breaking these crates open with its bare hands, left some fur behind, but it also left behind footprints which were human-like, but the toes, every last toe was very long and every bit as fat as a human thumb. So that's James Moore's story from 1863 in Harper's Ferry. Well, let's fast forward a little bit to 1864 and move it down south to the Confederate side of the action. Now, this would have been Bryce's Crossroads in 1864 outside of Memphis. And this would have been Abraham Collins. He was a cavalryman, a horseman for the Confederate side under Nathan Bedford Forrest. Well, he didn't see much action at Bryce's Crossing. He did, but he didn't remember most of it. He was in a very unfortunate spot behind a tree that took a canister charge directly, a direct hit, and it knocked him out of commission. He blacked out and doesn't remember a single moment of the actual war. When he woke up, it was nighttime. And he was surrounded by a bunch of fallen comrades, and crickets chirping. He found out he was unable to move. He was basically pretty much paralyzed from the waist down. He had took a gnarly wound to the leg and also one to the shoulder. He was out of commission. Well, a hairy, wild man type creature appeared, and drug him out of there. Not only that, he was in and out of consciousness, especially the first couple of days. So he only remembers bits and pieces of the first couple of days. At first, he thought that he had been found by his own troops and was back in a camp because he woke up, he saw firelight, so he thought he was safe. Come to find out, it was a fire in the cave that they had drug him to. So he had a freak out moment, and it turns out to be a whole family of these wild creatures that lived in this cave. But they were very advanced. They had their own language system. It wasn't like our spoken language, but it was like grunts and guttural sounds, but they definitely effectively communicated their points to one another. They understood each other perfectly well. And not only that, they had an understanding of things like the use of lime. Now, of course, Abraham Collins, being a wounded soldier, his bed quarters were not, let's just say they were a little musty and needed some attention. So one of these creatures spread powdered lime on his bedding side to keep the infection and the smell down. Not only that, these wild men, and he said 3 of them were female, 1 was male. Now, 1 of the females were older, 2 were younger, and then you had this male that was believed to be the mate to the older female. Well, that was the pecking order. Anyway, they had knowledge of medicine. They chewed up these herbs and roots, and they put it on his wounds, on his open wounds. It sped his healing. They helped him get up and on his feet and to walk again. They basically got him on the mend, where he was ready to go. Before one day, they just carried him back to the mouth of this cave. Of course, no words were spoken. They didn't know how to speak. And he rode off. And the thing was, he stuck this in a letter in a old war journal to be opened upon his passing. He didn't even want to confront this story while he was alive, but I guess he figured it was important enough, because his whole point was, we, if anything, were the beasts in that scenario. And I think when you look at it from that filter, from that perspective, it carries a lot of weight. We really were the savages in that whole scenario, and they were just seeking peace and supplies. Like even in the Harper's Ferry incident, they were just raiding their camp for supplies. They weren't trying to start any aggression. But that's been Jay's Haunted Appalachia for tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed the stories of the Civil War Bigfoots. And thank you guys for all your thoughts and your prayers. A lot of you know I've been going through some pretty heavy health issues here lately. I think we might be back have the upper hand again there. At least I'm feeling good today, so we'll take it. You guys want to keep those thoughts and prayers coming. I'll never be mad about that. And keep sending me your stories and suggestions, guys. And keep Appalachia haunted, y'all.
Let's read a scary story. This one is titled, Man Followed Me in the Grocery Store. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage, where creepy and cozy meet. So grab a blanket and get cozy, because we're about to read a creepy story. I stopped at the grocery store at about 9:30 p.m. I pulled in 2 spots over from someone who was sitting in their car. I noticed a spider on the inside of my driver's window as I was getting out, and it took me a minute to take care of that before I went inside the store. That was when I first noticed the man in the other car had been staring over at me, watching as I killed the spider. I felt uncomfortable, but tried not to read too much into it at the time. I feel uneasy as a woman at night in parking lots sometimes, but the parking lot was somewhat full, well lit, and there were people nearby, and I parked fairly close to the entrance. I went inside to pick up the 2 things I needed quickly, and noticed the same man inside walking towards me and staring again. He didn't say anything as he walked past, but he continued to stare. He turned around and watched me as he passed. I gave him a confused look and turned down an aisle so he could no longer see me. Once I got my 2 items, I saw that he'd done a big loop around and was standing looking at me from the end of another aisle. I hurried to the front of the store where more people were and checked out as quickly as I could. I walked to the parking lot, looking over my shoulder to make sure he wasn't around. I also timed it to walk out with a few other people. As I was walking up to my car, I noticed his car was still there, but he was not in it. I scanned the area around my car to make sure he wasn't waiting there. I got into my car quickly and locked the doors. I was backing up out of the parking space to leave when I saw him walking quickly out of the store and up to my car. As I put the car in drive to pull away, he was waving at me and asking me to put my window down so he could say something to me. He was empty-handed and he had clearly not bought anything. He tried to step in front of my car, but I pulled around him and quickly left. I noticed he was just standing next to his car, watching me turn out of the parking lot and down the road in front of the store. I was checking my car to see if my headlights were off, one was out, or some other logical reason he would have needed to stop me, but I couldn't find anything. I hadn't dropped anything in the store, and he hadn't tried to talk to me inside at all. I called the store to warn them about his behavior, in case he was doing it to others. I just had this gut feeling that something was really off with him, and not to put my window down. So scary and creepy. The next story is titled, A Man Stood Outside My House Shining a Flashlight. I'm a female, and this happened a few nights ago when I was lying in bed watching Avengers Infinity War. It was about 11:30 at night, and it was pitch black outside. After an hour into the film, I thought I heard a noise outside that sounded like my front gate being opened. For a moment, I thought it was a film. However, I turned the volume down so low as I didn't want to wake my parents, and the noise sounded too loud to be a part of the movie. I paused it and sat still for a moment, then made my way to the window, which looks out onto the street. My blinds are part of the window, and you can see a glare from the streetlights if you press right up to them, and even outlines of the people in the street. Across from the road of my house was a figure, shining their phone flashlight onto the house parallel to mine. They seemed to be a man, and I couldn't see their face as it was too dark, and they had black clothing on. They observed the house for a few seconds and stood in front of their short fence. For a minute, I thought it could be a confused delivery driver until they walked a few steps to the house on the left. Like the first time, they shined their flashlight onto the new house. I was half asleep and confused, so I didn't wake up my parents and tell them. I carried on watching them, and then all of a sudden, they turned off their flashlight, stood still, and made their way down towards the end of the street. I observed them as they went, but I didn't see them go all the way down to the street as my window doesn't allow a view that far. What was weird was that they didn't stop to look at other houses or stop at all. It makes me wonder if they somehow saw me looking, even though I didn't open my blinds once, just peeked through the small gaps between the slits. My side lamp was on, so maybe they saw my shadow. They didn't come back later that night, at least I don't think they did. Next story is titled, This Happened Years Ago and It Still Freaks Me Out. Several years ago, I was hanging out with 4 friends of mine at Elle's house. It was getting late, and suddenly someone had the idea to go in the backyard and play flashlight tag / hide and seek. Everything started out fine. We were laughing and joking with each other. Then it was my turn to seek. For context, Elle's backyard is shaped like a rectangle. Her back porch sits on the top of the width. There is a greenhouse on one side and a trampoline on the other. I closed my eyes and counted to whatever number, and then I went to look. Em was laying on top of the trampoline due to the fact that she didn't want to play in this round. I looked under the trampoline and found R crouched in the corner by the fence. Finding him, I said, I found you, R. You can come up now. I said this as I was standing up, and when I didn't get a reply, I bent down again to find no one was there. This freaked me out, and I quickly went to find everyone behind the greenhouse, including R, who was on the far side. This meant that he couldn't have been under the trampoline, as there was no way he could have moved around this quickly. Along with this, he isn't the kind of person to play tricks like this. I told everyone what happened and was visibly freaked out. Em, who is R's sister, even confirmed that I said I had found R. After this happened, I went inside due to the fact that I refused to be out there any longer. Em ended up telling me that what I saw would have been a mimic. Frankly, I do believe in spirits, but when things happen, I try to find the logical explanation first. Only there is no logic to this. I have had a similar encounter when I was younger, but I won't share that here. This is one of the scariest things that has ever happened to me, and even years later, it still freaks me out. Let me know what you thought of those stories, and if you have any scary stories of your own you'd like me to read, just send me a DM.
There's a particular set of rules that you must remember if you are to camp alone. Now, the first rule of camping alone is never set up your tent at night, because this is when you are the most vulnerable. And you cannot keep focus on what's behind you, what's around you, because you're focused on putting up the tent. The second rule is always have a fire going. No matter what time of day it is, always keep that fire going and keep it nice and bright and tall. The third rule that you must remember if you're camping alone is when you go in your tent at night, make sure it is completely sealed up. No holes, make sure everything is zipped and closed, because it's believed that stuff can even come in through the tiniest of cracks. Now, the fourth rule, when you are camping alone, you should never make noise at night. You should never whistle. You should never sing. You should try and keep it quiet as possible. Now, the fifth rule, which is the most important, is always have some sort of entertainment. Keep yourself occupied. Have some music. Have an audiobook, but never let yourself start to wander and let your mind go, because that's when you are the most vulnerable. Now, there was this man named Jonathan. Jonathan decided he was going to go camping alone up in the Rocky Mountains. So he heads up to the spot, and he sets up his tent and gets his campsite ready. And he said he just remembered that, there were all these sounds of wildlife and the wind blowing, and it was just very peaceful and sort of like musical. And he said, he had his dog with him, and they sat around the fire for a bit, and it started to get late. So he decided to go into his tent. So as he goes in his tent, his dog lays over to the side of him. And soon he begins to doze off. Well, at some point in time in the night, he awakes to something shaking his tent. And he said he could hear this voice saying, please come out of the tent. Like, I need help. Help me, please. Get out of the tent. Help me. And so he's like, what's going on? Like, what's going on? So he goes to the zipper, he unzips the tent, and he goes outside. But when he gets out of the tent, there's nobody around. It's just completely quiet. And it was eerily quiet because he couldn't hear the wind anymore. He couldn't hear the wildlife. And he said that the other strange thing was when he went to bed, there was this bright full moon overhead. But as he looked up in the sky, the moon was gone. There wasn't any clouds. It was a completely clear night. But the moon somehow had disappeared. So this kind of freaked him out a little bit. He goes back inside his tent and he zips up the zipper. Well, he lays down and he said, you know, his dog would come to the side of him or would lay by his feet. And that always made him feel a little better. So he said, you know, he started to kind of doze off again. He said that's when he kept feeling like the dog, like rubbing his leg. And he's like, what are you doing, boy? Like, you know, I'm trying to sleep. And he said that's when he looks down at his feet and there's nothing there. And when he looks over, his dog is right over here towards his head. So he is like, you know, what's going on? Like, was there an animal or something? He goes, he unzips the tent, he goes outside, said, you know, there was nothing out there. As he got ready to go back in his tent, he said he started to see these shadows. He said that you could see figures that looked like they were tall, skinny, kind of lanky. They almost looked like they were crawling around amongst the trees. They were all around him. So he hurried up, got back inside his tent, and he zips it up. And he just said, you know, he's just sitting there with his dog. And the whole time he thought it was strange because the dog didn't alert to any of this. It didn't bark. It was just quiet. It was just laying there. And he said that's when all of a sudden he felt this tent start to move. Something grabbed the tent and was dragging him. And he was so afraid that he passes out. And when he awakes, he said the tent was completely still, felt like everything was normal again. He said he thought it must have been a dream until he unzips the tent and he realizes he is a good distance away from his campsite. So he grabs his dog and they run out of there back to his vehicle and they left that night. And they left the tent and everything behind. So it's important to remember when you camp alone, always know the rules.
Dear Jason, I haven't thought about you in a while. I was making progress, I moved on, but I have a problem and you're the only one that could understand. I can no longer feel the carpet in my house. But let me start at the beginning. I met Henry 2 years after you, and I hadn't expected to find anyone, but there he was, and I was doing better, like so much better, and he became the rock that I could cling to. Whenever I began to feel the world fall apart, he would just place my hand over his heart and hold me until I could feel the ground beneath my feet again. We have a child together, a boy named Jonathan, and he'll be 2 soon, same as our Jamie when I lost you both. But I can't let that happen again, but I feel it same as last time. Every day I come home from work, take off my shoes, walk barefoot across our carpet to pick up my son. And it's an old carpet, something that we've talked about getting rid of for years, but just never really got around to doing. It's shaggy, like something from the 70s, you know, like really curl your toes into. It's distinctive. But last week, something changed. I can't feel it anymore. It's different. It's like flat, unresponsive, broken. It's just like the window in our living room that Jamie used to stare at, the one that stopped working. I've started wearing shoes in the house now because I refuse to acknowledge the carpet. You know, I figured that if I ignore it, maybe it'll go away. I always wondered, you see, that maybe if I just left that stupid window alone, that you would still be with me. So ignoring it was working until this evening. I don't remember how I got home from work. I don't remember ever having traveled home from work in these past 2 years. So like, is the world falling apart or is it just me? Because I hope to God it is just me. I spoke of this to Henry, not everything, not the details, but just enough. And he held me, stroked my back, told me to listen to his heart, to feel the warmth of his skin, you know, that he's real, our son is real, and our life together is real. But you were real too, you know? I held you in your arms, I felt your heartbeat, I felt the warmth of your skin, I held Jamie, I saw the life in his eyes. Our life was real too. And yet, I will woke up from you. Okay, you disappeared into that nothingness. 5 years of us shattered by the winds as the doctors pulled me out of that coma. I don't know why I'm making this for you. I just need someone to understand, even if that someone never existed. It's happening again, Jason. I don't want to wake up again.
Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
Let's watch a paranormal video. This video is actually centered around a Mexican urban legend that started to circulate around the internet around 2017, and that is the legend of the ghost ambulance. Along a certain highway in Mexico, there is said to be a cross on the side of the road marking the spot where a young woman lost her life due to a traffic accident. The cross was put there by her family members and has remained on the side of the road ever since. According to this legend, if you are driving down this road late at night and switch your radio to a certain frequency, you'll start to hear an ambulance. And in March of 2017, a man decided to drive down this highway to see if this legend had any truth to it.
Buenas noches, raza. Estamos en una calle, donde se supone una persona falleció. De hecho, está la cruz por ahí donde la persona murió. ¿Por qué razón? No se sabe. Pero si escuchan la radio, la estación está en la 690. La estación no se ha cambiado, es la misma estación. Ahí vamos. Por allá está la cruz. Dale lento, más lento, más lento. ¡A la madre! ¿Dónde está la cruz? Dale, dale. Ahí está la cruz del muertito.
He very clearly started to hear the sound of an ambulance. Like many of the paranormal videos that we watch, this one is very divided, with some people believing it and some thinking it's a hoax. This remains a pretty well-known legend to this day, and still when people drive down this road, they claim to hear and see a phantom ambulance. Let's look at some scary photos. The poster of this first photo says that a friend of theirs was taking their dogs out one night, and after the dogs did their business, they kept looking at one particular spot and they would not stop barking. Curious as to what the dogs were seeing, their friend pulled out his phone and started to take pictures, and one of those pictures captured something terrifying. This next photo was actually shown to me by one of you, and it shows a young man in a hospital bed after having survived a pretty bad accident. His family gathers around him so that they could all take a group photo, but there appears to be something else leaning into the photo as well. And the poster of this final photo says that it was taken in the early 2000s on a flip phone inside of an opera house. Looking back at the photo, they can't really tell what it is for sure, but they can definitely make out a face. Let's watch a creepy video. The original poster of this video is unknown, but it started to surface on the internet around 2011. And the person who recorded this video claims that in July of 2011, around 1 in the morning, he kept hearing noises coming from the roof of his house. This had been happening to him for a while, and one night he decided to take out his camera and he caught this.
Partner, these are the shingles. Hello? Oh my god.
He was so frightened by what he saw that he actually fell off the roof. He has no idea what he captured on his roof, and neither do we. There are theories ranging from it being an alien, to being a skinwalker, to being a deranged person. And while a lot of these theories make sense, there's also a lot of doubt around it being a person, because human eyes don't reflect light like that. But what do you think it could be?
My dad died 7 years ago. Then my mom got a phone call that she still can't explain. Hi everyone, welcome back to Candlelit Whispers with Amanda. Today we have an interesting story submitted by a listener about a strange phone call. A few years after my dad died, my mom took a trip to Florida to visit with her friends. One night she couldn't sleep. It was around 1 a.m., and she was sitting with her friend in her hotel room. They were watching TV. Then her phone rang. At first she ignored it, but it kept ringing, so she picked up. Then she could hear a man's voice coming through. "I'm fine." It was soft and it was distant. My mom froze because she recognized the voice immediately. It was my dad's. Shaking, she whispered, "Michael," and then the line crackled. Then the voice spoke one more time. "Tell Katie I'm okay." And then the call disconnected. My mom's friend was sitting a few feet away, and she witnessed the whole thing. She saw the phone ring. She saw my mom burst into tears. My mom has never been someone who believes in the paranormal, but she called me immediately afterward. It was after 2 a.m., and she was crying so hard that I could barely understand her. When she finally calmed down, she repeated the message. "Your dad wanted you to know that he's okay." And this happened years ago. To this day, neither of us have found an explanation for that phone call. And honestly, I'm not sure I want one. If you had this happen, if this happened to you, would you believe it, or would you believe it's someone playing a prank? It's heavy because you're experiencing the loss, so that's all you want is to hear their voice again. But you tell me what you think about this story in the comments below.